According to ancient Greek poets, philosophers, and historians, the present age is just a shadow of the former epoch called the Golden Age of Kronos. But who was this ancient god, Kronos? All Greek astronomical traditions agreed that Kronos was the planet Saturn. Our own name for the planets came from the Romans. In unison, Roman poets and historians insisted that in a former time Saturn had ruled as a god-king, producing a paradise on earth. It would be almost impossible to overstate the power of this memory among the different cultures. For the Babylonians, the Hebrews, and the Greeks, the most sacred day of the week was the Sabbath, a ritual remembrance of the lost epoch. And in each of these cultures, this holiest day was the day of Saturn, the Latin Saturnidis, or Saturn's Day, the Celtic day of Ceter, our Saturday. But the Golden Age did not last. In the myths of Quetzalcoatl, of Ra, and of An, of Kronos and of Saturn, the Golden Age does not just come to an end. It ends violently. And with the collapse of the Golden Age arrives the feared comet, the dragon of darkness, the fall into the cosmic night, the clash of the titans. All of the symbols of doomsday. Sunrise. To the star worshippers, a symbol of the cosmic dawn, when the universal monarch, the first sun god, shone above the world. The ancient Greeks called their sun god Helios. We assume they were referring to the sun we know, the sun that rises in the east and sets in the west. But in the earliest Greek manuscripts, Helios was the name of the planet Saturn. And the Greeks were not alone. The Babylonian Shamash, always translated as sun, was identified as Saturn. So also the Egyptian Ra, the Hindu Surya, the Latin Sol. But Saturn is a mere dot in a starry expanse. What could have caused the first star worshippers to celebrate that minute speck as the sun? Every day our sun rises in the east and sets in the west. But the archaic sun god Saturn did not rise or set. It did not move. Egyptian texts say of the sun god Atum, or Ra, the great god lives fixed in the middle of the sky. Surprisingly, the Babylonians used almost exactly the same language to describe the sun god Shamash in the stationary center of heaven. For an earthbound observer, there is only one motionless spot in the sky, the celestial pole. The stars we see are actually cutting a circle around the polar axis, close to the star Polaris. Of course, nothing would seem more irrational than an ancient sun god at this location. And yet, throughout the Near East, the universal monarch appears as a central sun called the axis and the pole of the world. To the Hindus, the sun god Surya occupied the place of supreme rest, the motionless site. So too the Greek Helios and the Aztec Quetzalcoatl. In their earliest expressions, these figures occupy the stationary cosmic center. There is an astonishing unity to this global tradition. Ancient Iranian astronomers identified the pole as Saturn's home, and so did the Neoplatonists of Greece. Roman poets remembered Saturn as the steadfast star, and Chinese astronomers recalled that, in the beginning, Saturn was the arch premier at the celestial pole. On every continent, archaeologists have uncovered curious drawings of an archaic sun. They do not look like our sun, yet they are strangely similar. And most mysterious of all is the great crescent encircling the sphere of this enigmatic sun. Early Egyptian drawings place crescent horns on the sun god Ra. In Mesopotamia, the crescent is repeatedly drawn wrapped around the sun god Shamash. A crescent horn turning in the sky. The image appears throughout the world. A vast crescent, unlike anything in our own sky today. If we take the testimony of the ancients as a literal description of actual events, the events would have looked like this. The earth moved in a congregation of planets appearing as immense forms in the sky. Saturn was seen as a huge, stationary body at the celestial pole. Venus appeared squarely in the center of Saturn, and Mars appeared inside of Venus. Jupiter was there also, but hidden by Saturn. The entire system moved through a diffuse cloud of gas, illuminated by our sun. On Earth, this meant that there was no clear distinction of day and night. At an early juncture, gaseous material or dust stretched from Venus towards Saturn. In periods of stability, these radiating streams appeared as a three-pointed and a four-pointed star-like pattern. Over time, the surrounding cloud dissipated. A more clearly defined cycle of day and night began. A bright crescent appeared on Saturn, created by light from our sun. As the Earth rotated on its axis, the crescent visually turned around the polar center. The smaller planet Mars was progressively destabilized and appeared to descend from its central position as it moved closer to the Earth. It returned to the central position then descended still further, growing larger with each descent. When it visually dropped below Venus, a stream of material was seen stretching between Mars and Venus. As it continued to descend, gas and dust began to extend towards Earth. Lateral displacements of both Venus and Mars occurred. Gas, ice, and debris spiraled between the two planets. Eventually, the spiraling material gathered into a band encircling Venus. As the planetary system moved through space, the appearance of the band changed dramatically. The vertical movements of Mars continued. Atmosphere and other material stretching toward the Earth with each descent. Eventually, this material reached the Earth with disastrous effects. When the skies cleared, Mars was seen moving away, a stream of gas and dust stretching upward, with Mars appearing as the apex of the illuminated column. The band encircling Venus gradually opened. The four streams of comet-like material radiated once more from Venus. And material stretching from Mars to Earth retreated up the polar axis. The stable period of Saturn's domination ended with the collapse of the planetary configuration. Jupiter appeared for the first time as Saturn tumbled from its stationary position. These events were followed by a period of great confusion and upheaval. With the displacement of Venus, the band and radiating material collapsed, spiraling between Venus and Mars, then scattering into whirl-like patterns. There was a temporary renewal of the configuration, now visually dominated by Jupiter. And only later did the configuration fall apart, the planets moving into a new, more remote equilibrium. First Mercury, then Venus, Earth, and Mars, Jupiter, then Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and finally distant Pluto. In the ancient planetary system, 5 planets must be reckoned with. Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Mars, Earth. This planetary configuration circled around its own center of gravity as it simultaneously revolved around the Sun. The planets were extremely close together, interacting with each other gravitationally. In this collinear system, the planets stayed in line. But the small planet Mars was moved by resonance into an increasingly elliptical orbit. It began to oscillate between the 2 larger planets, Venus and Earth. As Mars approached the larger bodies, atmosphere and oceans were pulled from its surface. Clouds of water, gas, and dust scattered into the surrounding space, then were pulled and stretched between the planets. The alignment grew progressively more unstable, leading to displacement of Venus, Mars, and presumably the Earth. Eventually, the result was a complete unraveling of the alignment, a dismemberment of the configuration.
The myths begin with the timeless epoch before the fall, before time-keeping references, before seasons, before the cycle of day and night.
It is the Golden Age, the age of the great planetary conjunction. In the beginning there was the universal monarch, the firmly seated God, the motionless sun. A God remembered as the great sphere of heaven, when the heaven was close to the earth. The universal monarch possessed a luminous eye, heart, and soul, the mother goddess, Venus, daughter and spouse of the universal monarch. Within the womb of the goddess resided the unborn hero, Mars, heart of the heart, pupil of the eye. The goddess was the great star, radiating its comet-like hair in all directions, the celestial prototype of the beautiful princess. She was the glory of heaven, the animating flame giving life to the ancient sun god. Her place was squarely in the center of the sun. This produced the great wheel of the sun, with the goddess as the nave and the hero as the axle. As the configuration evolved, the comet-like streams gathered into 3 rays, remembered as the triform or threefold goddess. Later, this same comet-like material presented 4 streamers or rays, giving the wheel its 4 spokes, 4 luminous winds, 4 life-bearing streams, 4 flaming arrows launched into the 4 directions, and the 4 pillars of heaven. Day and night arrived with the coming of a great crescent on Saturn, this crescent enclosing the central star of Venus. Saturn's crescent horns provided the celestial timepiece for the daily cycle, fading against a brightening sky as they rose to the right. Growing brilliant as they descended to the left. The hero was born from the womb of the mother goddess and wore the goddess as a conical crown. He grew a beard. His tongue protruded. He took the form of a dagger or peg plunged into the below. The hero consorted with the goddess, re-entering the goddess womb as the impregnating seed, then emerging again in a new incarnation, as both the goddess and the hero broke away from their original axial positions. The reborn Mars wore a spiraling sidelock, which was the goddess herself now taking on her serpentine aspect. Hero and goddess engaged in a spiraling dance about the cosmic center. The serpent tail wrapped itself around Venus to produce a band presenting the form of a great eye, so that in its re-entry, Mars became the pupil, or the red apple, of the eye. Saturn's golden age was interrupted by catastrophe, when the enclosure of the gods was sealed shut. The descent of the hero in his dark aspect brought overwhelming clouds and darkness. This was the underworld journey, the archetypal ordeal of the hero, and for the earth, a deluge of fire and water. Then Mars rose out of the waters of the deep to produce the world mountain. The opened eye of Venus formed the rim of the great world wheel, the fiery body of the encircling serpent. Watered by the four rivers, this was the land of the gods, resting on the summit of the world mountain, a bright crescent forming the horned peak. The mountain of Mars became the mooring post of the turning sky. The column of wind or water rising along the world axis. The pillar of the cosmos, with its four extensions holding aloft the world wheel. But the ancient paradise did not last. The hero spirited away the goddess, or stole the heart of the universal monarch who tumbled from the summit of heaven. The Golden Age gave way to the cosmic night, when the hordes of chaos were set loose and the doomsday dragon moved about in the sky, a monster created by the twisting forms of Venus and Mars. It was then that the terrible goddess appeared with wildly disheveled hair, lamenting the death of the universal monarch. In the events that follow, the hero will subdue the dragon or pacify the raging goddess. The universal monarch's own son, Jupiter, will be installed in the center of the sky. But the universal monarch has departed, and with his death, comes the end of the Golden Age.
In palm reading, the middle finger represents Saturn.